Frank Gaffney is with us, old pal of mine, and president of the Center for Security Policy. Go to securefreedom.org and counterjihad.com to check out what Frank is up to. Now, Frank, I have tons of clips I'm going to be playing throughout the show of the president at the UN, but I do not want to waste any of your time to get your thoughts. So he covered, it looks like, a half a dozen topics at least. You tell me where you want to start, and then I'll go from there.
Alex, where I think I'd start is kind of the bottom line. The president stood up for American sovereignty.
He did.
Very articulately, very powerfully, and I think very necessarily, because after all, he's surrounding him are people who hate American sovereignty and who are seeking through any means available, not least of which is, of course, the United Nations and the international norms and international law and international pressure campaigns and the like that it brings to bear incessantly against America, against Israel, against, sort of the free world more generally. And I thought this was an extraordinary platform for him to speak the truth and to do so in a way that really greatly enhanced its effect, because he did some of this last year, of course, when he was in front of the General Assembly. But this year, as he was able to make note, he'd done a couple of things that had really put in motion a disengagement from those sovereignty-sapping UN institutions like the Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court, the move of the embassy against the expressed will of the UN. There's one other thing that I wish he had put on the list, because it's really material to our relationship with a very important strategic ally, and that's Guatemala. The UN, actually, the United States State Department, even under Donald Trump, have been a fellow by the name of Ambassador Todd Robinson, have been actively using a UN anti-corruption program to try to destroy the elected, conservative, allied government of Guatemala. He didn't get to that, but I'm hoping that's going to be a feature of his work there and elsewhere going forward.
All right. So, Frank, can you tell me a little bit about what the point of the UN General Assembly meeting is? Because I don't really know what was supposed to be accomplished here. What was supposed to be accomplished? What was the goal?
Well, I think that, mostly it's an opportunity to strut the UN stuff as this world government by bringing all of these heads of state and senior diplomats from all over the place, to New York. They stand around, they drink, they party, they pat each other on the back and tell themselves how important they are. On the margins of it, traditionally, there have been these so-called bilaterals in which the various, leaders hobnob with each other and sometimes do deals. And, of course, one of those, which I have to say, Alex, I'm troubled by, that the president engaged in yesterday, is with Moon Jae-In of South Korea, because I think Moon is becoming increasingly overt about his sympathies with North Korea and his willingness to do deals with them, even if it means undermining the president's efforts to denuclearize that very dangerous North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un. He also used it, which should be clear, I think effectively, his speech to the assembly to lay out the case against Iran. And so to the extent it gives a platform for a president who is saying the truth, I think it is actually not such a bad thing. To the extent that it's been used by everybody from, Clinton to Obama as essentially a platform for submitting to the UN, I think that's not helpful at all, needless to say.
Sure. And I think that I'm going to play some highlights throughout the show today, but I think it is worth noting a low light or two. And the Moon Jae-In thing does concern me, and it's one of these things that I think you have to be paying very close attention to get this. But the South Korean regime is one of the more left-wing regimes in the world, and it is and especially one that is at the moment a very strategic ally for us, because one of the president's top goals, as it should be, is denuclearizing the North Korean peninsula. It'd be a historic accomplishment for the president and make the world a lot safer, and not just in America but also in the Pacific as well. I don't think we have any interest, even though, Frank, we're nationalists in this audience. I don't think we have any interest in seeing nuclear war break out anywhere. So we would like
Correct.
to see Kim. We'd like to see Kim stop nuclear proliferation, and we know that Kim and Moon have this bond, and it is something that is disheartening, because it does, I think, indicate to sane individuals here, it does not help Moon's credibility. His left-wing governance does not help his credibility as well. But the president does seem to be cozying up to him, and I can only hope this is stuff that the president gets that I don't, that this is the art of the deal. He is trying to do some sort of political calculation, but you never know, because the president's not going to explain it fully with the calculation here. But what is your analysis?
Well, there are two pieces to this, and the most important of the two is China. As you know, Alex, China really calls the shots in North Korea. And I think China, especially in the midst of increasingly hostile relations on trade, but on many other things as well, is telling its North Korean puppet not, in fact, to denuclearize, not, in fact, to engage in good faith negotiations with the President of the United States. So that is a very constraining factor. The thing is that, and I've seen this a lot, unfortunately, over the years, presidents become invested in arms control agreements or peace processes, and it creates conditions, and this is true, I think, of Donald Trump, though I regret to be critical of him on things like this, and I'm hoping you're right that he's got a master plan and it's all coming together brilliantly. But I fear that, as with some of his predecessors, this winds up blinding them to the evidence that doesn't fit the narrative. And this particular piece with Moon Jae-In, the president of South Korea, actively, and you're right, the leftist doesn't really begin to describe it. This is a pro-North Korean regime. Indeed,
Sure.
Substantial numbers of their delegation were at the World Workers' Party offices in New York yesterday, which is a pro-North Korean, communist front. This is symptomatic of the problem. And when you hear nice things being said about, bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula and unifying the Koreas and so on North Korea's terms, or in ways that embolden North Korea, not only will it not conduce to the denuclearization of this threatening North Korean regime, Alex, I'm afraid it will actually create conditions under which our troops will be unwelcome there, and we will see this peninsula sliding into the maw, I'm afraid, of, the sort of totalitarians. A terrible thing for the South Koreans, needless to say, and certainly for our interests as well.
It's high stakes chess here, and glad we have guys like Frank Gaffney to help us break it down. Go to securefreedom.org, counterjihad.com to keep up with Frank. Frank, let's talk about OPEC for a little bit. Oil prices near a 4-year high. They've kind of been hovering around there, and the president called out OPEC, saying ripping us off, and I don't like it. It's sort of on the nose, but I think this is something that we haven't given enough attention to on the show. Can you talk to us about this briefly?
Sure. Just one thing that I think the price spikes remind us of, Alex, is that America is an enormously energy-rich nation, thank God.
Yes.
In particular, we have a superabundance of natural gas. What we don't have at the moment is the widespread ability to use natural gas, particularly in a liquid form, specifically methanol, in automobiles that could otherwise burn it instead of gasoline. And one of the things that I think President Trump ought to be doing aggressively is establishing fuel choice by telling the auto manufacturers, warranty your cars to use methanol as well as ethanol as well as gasoline. And the vast majority of modern cars in the American fleet can do that. And if that happens, Alex, I think you're going to see the prices of oil plummeting because there will be alternatives to it. We've seen this in practice in places like Brazil, interestingly enough, where they've been using ethanol from sugarcane in a lot of their vehicles, all of their vehicles actually. This is a play that could break the back of OPEC. And, I'm for pumping more oil as well, and we've got a lot of that as well thanks to fracking. But more energy is a good thing for the world, not just for America. But fuel choice with methanol in the mix would make all the difference in what OPEC is still trying to do to screw us.
Yeah, I think so too. The Iran deal also came up a lot yesterday, and I want to get your thoughts on where the United States stands versus the UN, because this was where the biggest back and forth took place between the president and Rouhani, the Iranian premier. He was saying all sorts of horrible things, essentially comparing President Trump to Hitler at one moment, and which is funny because it was almost like he was channeling the CNN talking points, and I sadly only say that somewhat tongue in cheek.
Not an accident.
But yeah, I don't think it's entirely coincidental. But the United States versus Iran, one of the key themes that played out yesterday. Why do you think that was? Of all the rivalries globally that the United States has with other nations at this moment, powerful nations and determined nations, why the United States versus Iran? Why do you think that was the biggest centerpiece yesterday?
Because it is the biggest strategic challenge we're facing, certainly in the Middle East. This is a nation that, as you know, Alex, has not only obtained through its partnership with North Korea, speaking of North Korea, ballistic missiles, but it's well on its way to having nuclear weapons. It is a regime that seeks our destruction explicitly, and that of Israel. And we have our allies, to say nothing of Russia and China, trying to prop up this regime at a moment when its people are actively trying to get rid of it. These are all strategic imperatives, particularly because Iran is on the march and I think becoming an increasing threat to Israel. The president will almost certainly make this the feature of his effort as the chairman of the UN Security Council today, and I think properly so, not least to put on notice our European allies that they better get on side, that there will be real costs to them for enabling this very dangerous regime. By the way, dangerous to them as well as to us.
Frank Gaffney, I know you got to run today, get a little different schedule. I really appreciate the time. Always a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week, my friend.
Thank you for accommodating me, Alice.
All right.